Using the duct tape patterns as a guide, a model is built using clay. I didn't want it to weigh the full 100 pounds, so I used bags of packing material to fill the core. There's a lot less to move around then. Once you get the clay built up, it's all about the details. Making sure all of those lines are correct and that the shape holds to the pattern. All the details have to be perfect because the plaster will pick up every little bump and scratch in the surface of the clay. So I spent a lot of time smoothing, perfecting, re-smoothing. At this point, I was still using regular ceramic clay, so there was a lot of resetting of the moisture levels. It would start to dry out, I would spritz it down, cover it in wet paper towels for a couple of hours, and then come back to it. Later, I moved to an oil-based clay that didn't dry out as quickly. Very handy for modeling projects. The final steps in the clay model process are to build up the outer edge with a thick lip that will hopefully give it a little more strength and stability when worn. I also use dowel rods to push holes deep into the clay model that will be filled with plaster and will create the holes in the final glass pieces so that the armor can be tied together later. After all of the finagling and perfecting is done on the clay model, it's finally time for the plaster face coat. This is the layer that will capture all of the detail that I've worked so hard to put into the clay. The face coat is a 50-50 mix of potter's plaster and silica flour. I start by filling in the tie holes with the plaster mix using a craft syringe, and then I quickly coat the whole surface, using a spatula to move the plaster around and make sure the whole thing is covered. It's meant to be a thin coat that captures all of the details of the clay model. A quick cleanup of the board around the piece, and we are ready for layer 2. Because the back plate is so large and the plaster goes off so quickly, I had to call Andrew in to help with the second mold layer. Again, this is the 50-50 mix of potter's plaster and silica flour, but we're coating strips of chopped fiberglass mat and building them up on the surface for strength. With non-traditional Pate de Verre, your mold doesn't need to be much thicker than ½ an inch, but it needs the fiberglass layer of stability to survive the firing process. I use the remaining plaster mix to make a foot at the bottom of the mold so it will stay level in the kiln for firing. One last cleanup, and we're done with the plaster mold. This piece ended up being well over 50 pounds between the clay and the plaster, so Andrew helped me flip it for the next steps. After carefully removing the plexiglass backing board, I remove the packing material placeholders from the core and start removing the clay from the mold layer by layer, careful not to break the fragile plaster posts for the holes. I also have to be careful not to nick the mold with any of my tools, otherwise there will be scratches that show up in the final casting. Reshaping 50 to 75 pounds of clay after removal is a heck of a workout. My shoulders and back were screaming for months. Once all the clay has been removed, I clean the mold with water and soft makeup sponges, removing all traces of the clay and checking for any bubbles or blemishes that might need to be filled. If I find any bubbles in the areas where there will be cast glass, or if one of the posts does happen to break during cleaning, I can mix a tiny amount of new plaster and use it as a glue or a filler for those areas. On to the carving of the bas-relief designs into the mold. I had tried to build this design into the clay model early on, but it's just so much cleaner when it's carved into the plaster. I start with a pencil sketch to get the spacing and sizing right, then use clay tools to carve into the still damp surface of the plaster mold, refining and shaping them as I go. This is a truly terrifying part of the process because you've just spent such a long time making the mold, and if you carve the wrong spot, there's not really any going back. For the next steps of the non-traditional Pate de Verre process that I'm using, I need the plaster mold to stay slightly damp, so I use wet shop towels and cling wrap to hold that moisture in while I work. This project really pushed all that I learned from Alicia Lomne to the limit. Much larger than anything I had done previously. To add the bas-relief designs onto the armor, I use a wet packing inlay technique, mixing bullseye glass powder with water and packing it into the carved areas, then using a clean, wet paintbrush to clean up the edges and even out the paste. The edges of the back plate also get the wet packing powder technique, building up a thick edge for stability while it's being worn and giving the edges that extra pop of color saturation. To apply the main surface color of the armor, transparent bullseye powder is sifted onto the damp plaster in a gradient, light blue to dark blue edges, and a layer of white powder is added for brightness. After the surface color is on, layers of fine, clear frit mixed with gum arabic and water are carefully spooned in, spread across the surface, and packed down into thin coats. The piece will do most of its drying in the kiln, so I can load it into my Scut Studio Pro while it's still a little bit damp. It only just barely fit. I use ceramic kiln stands to keep it off the shelf so no damage is done and so that air can circulate. After a 32-hour kiln cycle of slow drying, melting, and annealing, it takes the piece several more hours to come back to room temperature before it can be safely removed. Upon opening the kiln, I found a huge crack across the piece, but the only way out is through. I carefully removed the crumbling plaster mold, wearing a respirator and spraying the edges down with water to mitigate the dust. The edges are covered in incredibly sharp little glass spikes, so it's always an adventure to divest and clean. Usually the glass gods get some blood out of this part of the process. The remaining plaster is cleaned from the piece using Dawn dish soap and warm water. I repair the crack using the majesty of cold fusion, aka gluing the shit out of it. I'm using UV 9000 low viscosity glue by the Crystal Edge. It's never done me wrong. I highly recommend it for bonding any sort of clear or translucent glass. With the piece whole again and strong enough to handle, I can start removing the stabby edges using a Fordham flex shaft and some diamond grinding bits. I have extra layers on, my face and hair covered, to keep all the little bits of flying glass from finding me. This is a slow process. You have to keep the bit that you're working on just under the water so that it doesn't overheat and fracture. A quick reset of the space and I can start filling any gaps in the edges and reinforcing the holes with 2-part epoxy sculpt. Because this is getting covered in copper foil, any dips or gaps will show, so they have to be patched. Epoxy sculpt dries rock hard and then can be sanded or carved. It's a really versatile material. The process takes way longer than I'd like to admit, and then it has to dry for a full 24 hours before I can start applying the foil coating. But it was the best option I had to get those edges perfect and rounded. Copper coating time. I've spliced in a bit of footage here from coating the chest plate on a different day. I forgot to record the beginning of foiling the back piece, and I really wanted to show the process start to finish, so you'll forgive the snap of one piece to another here in a moment. After cleaning the surface of the glass with alcohol, I apply overlapping strips of 1-inch wide copper foil adhesive tape. 2 layers of the overlapping foil going in opposite directions gives the whole structure added strength. Once the back is fully coated, I apply the copper foil around the edges as well, burnishing them with a wooden fid as I go to smooth out any creases or ripples for the perfect contact with the glass surface.